thought, on this occasion of the 50th anniversary of the quartet program, Castleman Quartet Program, everybody might be interested in what not that many people know, which is how it came about. So I'll start a little bit before. We're now in the late 60s, and Heidi and I are both in our late 20s, and we're finishing up our work for doctorate in musicology at the University of Pennsylvania. We're both at the same stage. We finished all of our work, and we've decided, although we're really enjoying what we're studying, we really don't want our life's work to be teaching musicology. And so we're thinking, what shall we do next? We had skills that were hireable. I had 3 people who had studied with me summers, who were seniors in high school, who were interested in coming studying with me somewhere. And Heidi was one of the world's experts on Berlioz the Critic. So that, given that, I came up with the idea of Philadelphia at the time had 5 good music schools, and I approached the 5th most famous to see if they'd like to hire us, which was called Philadelphia Musical Academy. And I went in and said, I have 3 high school seniors that would like to come, and Heidi is like the best musicologist you'll ever have. And you can get her to do it if she can also be on the viola faculty. And Joe Castaldo, who was the head of the school, said, great, just like that. and then he added, and we have a plan. Your timing is just right, because we're arranging right now to have a developmental summer program at Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And we need to have some string players, and hopefully you people could come up with the string players that we need for that program. And things develop, and then it gets to the end of March, and the Philadelphia Musical Academy discovers that what Jackson Hole wants is totally to Jackson Hole's advantage and not at all to anybody else's advantage, and so it's not what we want to do. So the president, Castaldo, deputizes the youngest faculty members to try to produce a program at Saratoga, where the Philadelphia Orchestra had its summer season, because a lot of the faculty of the school were in fact Philadelphia Orchestra members. However, the timing of this is as follows. They've decided they want the program about April 10th. The program has to start in July. The school has no people and has no money. All they can offer is a few work-study places for students that are at the school, but otherwise we're on our own. And they put each of us in charge of a certain division, and I thought, well, clearly there's no time to create a market. I have to figure out something for which there's already a market, and otherwise the program won't happen. And I thought to myself, okay, I'd graduated Harvard, and there were all these wonderful people at Harvard that played phenomenally but were not going to be professional. And there's nothing they would like better than to spend a summer playing chamber music. And furthermore, they weren't destitute at all in terms of money. And so I thought, and then that combined with the fact that, of course, as I mentioned, there were people from my summer programs that I taught at, they were interested in coming to anything that I was going to be teaching at anyway. So there was going to be a certain number of people that already I could get were interested, and then I would try to get quartets from each of the various pretty much Ivy League schools in the Northeast. So push came to shove, and June came around, and the wind program consisted of 3 flutes. The brass program consisted of 1 brass quintet, and my program consisted of 9 string quartets. There was a Harvard quartet, there was a Pennsylvania quartet, there was a Swarthmore quartet, there was a Yale quartet, and there was a quartet from Cleveland, there was a quartet from Detroit. I mean, and that's what we had. And it turned out to be very, very important, because all of these people, it was their life's dream to spend a summer playing chamber music. they were good players, but they weren't actually the greatest players, but they were good. I mean, the ones that were not from weren't from the Ivy League schools were very good players, but the ones that were filling in, that were academic. But what they had was an incredible love for chamber music. And getting ahead of the story some, we actually couldn't have them back because they weren't quite at the level that we had by the second summer. But they created an atmosphere of love for chamber music which has lasted to this day. I totally give credit to those people from that first summer for what's happened to the quartet program for 50 years, because they showed these other people who continued to come exactly what chamber music could be and how much fun it could be. And each summer people come back and teach other people that that's how things work out. So what I also knew was that in each city there was, of each of the string instruments, there was, like in Cleveland or in Detroit or in New York, there was somebody who taught all of the best high school students. And I knew who they were, partly from teaching, partly from performing, partly from colleagues that had been to school with me, but I knew who they all were. And that first summer of 1970, they sent me, I didn't get to them until April, so all of their best students were already at Tanglewood or Aspen. So they sent me their weak students, who were still very good, because these were terrific teachers. And as it turned out, they made more progress than the people that went to the more famous programs. So already in the second summer, these teachers sent us their best students. And now Heidi, at that point, wasn't known as a violist. And I was spending all of my time playing a lot of concerts with Paul Doctor, who was one of the most famous violists in the world. And so that first summer, Paul was actually the viola teacher. And Heidi was helped out in many ways, but wasn't really the viola teacher. And again, getting ahead of the story, about the third summer or so, the violist said, yeah, he's okay, he tells a lot of stories, but we really want to study with Heidi. And and because she's a great teacher. And I had to figure out, he was one of my best friends, how was I going to make this happen? It wasn't as though he needed to teach. He was very successful, so it was just simply not hurting his feelings and not making things work. And so I told very much a white lie, saying, it's my wife, she's a violist, what am I going to do? And he totally understood, and so we went on from there. During the course of the program, the first 3 summers, the program was at Saratoga, which was near where the Philadelphia Orchestra was, at Skidmore College, which had a facility which was good enough for us to use. And even they only gave me very little scholarship money, but they were controlling who I hired, which were mainly Philadelphia Orchestra people, because it was their money, even though it was not much money. But it became pretty apparent to me by about the 3rd summer that they weren't really offering very much, and they were demanding a lot. And so I said, either if I have my price, if you give me enough scholarship money, you can keep controlling it, but it's a lot more than you're giving me. And they didn't give me any more, and I said, okay, it's my program. And and at that same time, actually at a party, I met someone, I think at Penn, because I was still there, who said, I went to a private school in Troy, New York, named the Emma Willard School, and a woman whose husband invented some small part of the diesel engine, enormously wealthy, gave them a music building with 11 Steinways. And it's a school, it's a famous prep school. Jane Fonda went there, and a lot of it, but it was a very popular kind of a school for, wealthy girls. And so I approached them, and it turned out that the person that was the business manager for the school and his wife adored classical music. The school itself was located in Troy, New York, which meant it was an hour from Tanglewood and an hour from Marlborough. I had been a participant at Marlborough, and I'm from Boston, so therefore in any program that I was at was going to be welcome visiting either one of those places. But more to the point, this particular fellow who really ran the music building and ran a lot of what was going on in Willard was excited to get us there, and gave us a lot of leeway. Actually, one of my roommates at Harvard, Seth Rice, who I think is probably still a chef at a leading San Francisco restaurant, we put in charge of the kitchen, and he would do things like driving to Boston on Mondays to get the fresh Dover sole at the wharfs for the food that we would have. Eventually, Emma Willard said he couldn't keep doing it because apparently he left the kitchen a mess. But for a while we had really great food, and we lived a charmed life, And actually, the woman who gave the money is also the woman. She was at least partially responsible for Boston University's great practice rooms. They have like 40 practice rooms that are air conditioned and you can change the sound and everything. But she gave them money for that, and she gave the money to Emerald School that we used. And she actually lent me a Del Gesù violin that I did my Isaiah recording on, because she was an amateur violinist, but a rich amateur violinist. So we were set up at Emerald School with wonderful kinds of, and among the people who came the first summer were some spectacular talents, the second summer I should say, and they decided, at this time Philadelphia Musical Academy suddenly came into money. But about 2 years after we went there, not enough money to help us in the summer, but enough money that everybody who was good got to go for free, and to the college, and which was, I might add, about the worst thing that could have happened to the Philadelphia Musical Academy, because the way they handled it, our students had everything they wanted and everybody else at the school was treated like trash, because we were the important ones. But the school, the faculty of this school, this is at the same time the quartet program has started. I and Norman Carroll, concertmaster of Philly Orchestra, were the violin teachers. Karen Tuttle and Heidi were the viola teachers. Klaus Adam of Juilliard Quartet and Robert Sylvester were the cello teachers. Gary Grafman and Susan Starr were the piano teachers, which frankly was better teachers than Curtis had. And everybody was going for free. And we were taking students that were not already formed but were as talented as the Curtis students, and actually beating the Curtis students in every competition. And I can even tell a wonderful story about a wonderful person, Peter Zazowski, who's a wonderful violinist and who's a wonderful person and a wonderful teacher who's at Boston University. But he lost several competitions to my then best student, a wonderful player named Mitchell Stern, and said at one point, "Charlie, what would it take for me to bribe you and him to leave town so I can keep winning competitions?" So it was that kind of situation. I mean, he wished us well. That was, Peter's great, but it was that kind of situation that kind of couldn't keep up with us. And then once people like this Mitch Stern came to study at Philadelphia, then and other violists like that, like one of the violists who came to study with Heidi was Karen Dreyfus, who's now the teacher at USC. It was, and like Kim Kashkashian was there studying with Karen Tuttle. So it was top of the line in every way. But it became clear after a while that the money was not going to be there forever. And Bobby Sylvester, who was really one of the best cellists, he's disappeared. He's still around somewhere in Washington State, but he is retired. But he figured before the rest of, he had actually come, he had been in the faculty of UT Austin, and he left there to come to Philadelphia to join me in that faculty. And he figured out before I did that the school was about to fall apart. and left to go to Eastman, and I followed him there. But meanwhile, quartet program is doing very well, and the students that were coming, they were violin students who were coming to study with me, and there were viola students who were coming to study with Heidi from quartet program pretty much. There were cello students coming to study with Bobby, and there were people coming to be with those first-rate players, and they sight read they all lived in the same part of Philadelphia, and they sight read every night, and they had a wonderful time, and they were supported, and everything seemed idyllic. Then around, I don't know, it was for several summers, but then eventually around 7 or 8 summers into the program, our benefactor at Emma Willard left to become the headmaster of the Webb School in California, which is one of the best private schools. It was a real promotion for him, but it meant we no longer had someone in the administration at Emma Willard who was going to be on our side. However, he was actually replaced by someone who played the flute, who was quite sympathetic. He wasn't giving us everything the way the first guy was, but we didn't realize how blessed we were, because this guy was really wonderful. He just wasn't quite giving us everything the way the first guy was. But so we were still doing extremely well, and the program was still fine. Then, as time went on, what happens at private schools, as we found out in various other places, around every 8 or 9 years, if you have a private school, the administration changes, and everything changes, and the direction of the school changes. And after about 8 or 9 years, a third woman was actually the business manager, who resented us because she thought she'd have nothing to do in the summers, but since we were doing that, she was having to work, so therefore she didn't think that was fair to her, because that wasn't what she had taken the job for. And it had started out with the fact that I'll back up a little bit, that as a student there were 2 programs that I had attended that were important for me in the summer. I had gone to Meadowmount, which was a program which the practice idea and the curriculum is spectacular, is really wonderful. But for me, the philosophy of how they treated people, at least at that point, wasn't very good at all. So, and then after that, I went to Marlborough, which is, of course, a wonderful place for the best musicians, and everybody is treated as a wonderful human being. But people treated me as some kind of a slight weirdo because I practiced 2 hours a day. Because it was, for all of these wonderful players that were there, a chance to let their hair down after a hard year's work. And for me, it wasn't. For me, it was that too, but I also was practicing. So that when I started this program, I wanted to treat the people the way they were treated at Marlborough, but have the kind of the work ethic be the work ethic of Meadowmount. The first summer that we had the program, it was a summer program, so I had counselors. You have people, high school students, you have counselors, who knows what they're going to do. And I found, to my shock and dismay, I spent all summer chasing after the counselors who weren't behaving at all, and the kids were practicing. So I decided maybe the student body isn't the same as every other summer camp. So we never had counselors after that, and I've always run the program with the idea that trusting the students. I mean, I've always been there. I assume actually that a 16-year-old, all things being equal, even if left alone, will probably behave the way he learned to behave at home, or she learned to behave at home. And that has turned to be pretty much true. They want guidance, and I or anybody else who's on the faculty or in the administration is always available to guide them. sometimes, at least now there's enough of an age difference that it doesn't happen, but it used to happen that when people would pull pranks, what was required, it was kind of regarded that I had to know what was going on with the prank and say, no, you can't throw paint there, but yes, you can put shaving cream there, or things like that, so I knew what was going on, and would guide them to do things that weren't dangerous, but I didn't, but they didn't stop. I didn't stop them from doing the pranks. Also, when I mention this story, it's telling you that we've always had students that not only played exceptionally well, but were responsible, were creative, and had the kind of background at home that the parents could trust them. I mean, I remember there was a girl actually from Portland, Oregon, Becky Anderson, who came at age 12 or whatever it was, and her teacher, who had been Clarice Atchison, who had been my student, said, I know you don't take 12-year-olds, take Becky, you won't be sorry. She's so mature, and sure enough, she was, her quartet was the most disciplined, they obeyed the rules most, and they played great. She actually later went to Curtis and is doing very exciting things also. But at that point, she was this 12-year-old who was so, and that happened to be a year when afterwards I played solo in Portland, I think with the orchestra, or I was in Portland then, we were playing a concert, and her parents invited me over for dinner and said, in the process of dinner, why we wanted Becky to go to a quartet program? And I said, no, he said, because they don't have rules. Rules get in Becky's way. And, I think it's accurate, so, and she came back, and not only did she come back, but she would be a 15-year-old that in general, I try to put people in an age bracket pretty near themselves. But with Becky, I put her with 15-year-olds, with 20-year-olds, and 18-year-olds, and 21-year-olds. There was just no reason, because her age really had nothing to do with her maturity at all. So there was no real, and she'd been there, so she didn't have any social issues. Everybody loved her. So there are decisions like that had been made. Okay, but from Emma Willard's point of view, getting back to why I really got into this, we were out of control. Because people were wandering around at various hours. They weren't doing anything wrong, but they were wandering around, and this very disciplined girls' school was used to having hours and rules, and the girls could be punished if they were out after such and such an hour, which is not the way we ran it. They had guards that were there to enforce all of this, who were totally on our side. They said, your kids behave so much better than the girls ever do during the year. The guards were totally convinced that what we were doing worked, and that they wished the girls were able to be given the opportunities that we were. But this third business manager who came, the one who was angry we were there anyway, started pressing us on that we had to have certain rules, couldn't have this or that, and it became kind of clear that this was not going to work out. And at this very time, I think you have a series of photos that we have of the early years of quartet program, and one of the photos has Yo-Yo Ma in it, and I think Eleanor Schoenfeld, who was our cello teacher, and a man, Rudy Schlegel, who you wouldn't know otherwise, but as coincidence would have it, that last summer at Emma Willard, he was the director of a program at Great Woods, which is near Providence, New York, which was part pop and part classical. And he offered us a deal that we agreed to go there for 3 summers. And the first summer, they would charge us less than Emma Willard was charging us. The second summer, they would charge us what Emma Willard was charging us. The third summer, they would charge us what it was costing them, and then we would stay if we could manage it. we did that. The third summer was more than we could handle, and so we actually then moved on to another location. But Rudy was the imaginative person who came up with the process that really worked well. Among the other, there was that summer, the part of the program, you had very famous pop artists that were performing there, like Elton John. But also the Pittsburgh Symphony was there with Leonard Slatkin conducting. And it was all sponsored by somebody who, Wolf, who had a patent on some small part of the cell phone. And so he made it possible for us to be there because the facility, namely Wheaton College, didn't actually have any music facilities. But so he arranged to rent pianos. He arranged to rent a shell, so we turned a classroom into a music hall. And it turns out that third summer, he began showing strange signs of, he fired Slatkin for no reason at all. And he wasn't threatening us at all. But it occurred to me that there was nothing stopping him from, in April, deciding not to give us any money anymore. And there we would be with no concert hall, no pianos, and no money. And so we moved. I mean, but that was as much because the 3 years were up, but also as because we felt that it wasn't a very secure situation. So I mean, I think anyway, and we then went to Bucknell College, which was a lovely home because it actually had one of the most important quartet series during the year. All the most famous quartets had been playing there every year, and then for some reason it wasn't being continued. And so there was a built-in audience in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania that was used to hearing quartets, that was really excited to come to all of our concerts. And it was really wonderful, you know, and there were reasons why after 7 or 8 years that didn't quite work out. So we then moved on, and we moved to our current location on the east is SUNY Fredonia, State University of New York at Fredonia, where essentially, unlike all the private colleges and schools we were at, the same people are there that were there when we came. You might think that a state institution having a political connection would be even less stable, but it's not. I mean, it's turned out that and that the people that are there are people we have a real relationship with, and they seem to be there to stay, which is really exciting. And so we've stayed there. There's no real reason why we wouldn't continue, I don't think. And then a friend got for his first job a position at Linfield College about a few years ago in Oregon, and arranged for us to have a 3-week program there, which we are continuing to have. And actually almost had this summer even with the coronavirus, because the governor of Oregon has done an exemplary job fighting the virus. But part of that is restricting things, and they had a recent spike, and so she said no, that under those circumstances we can't have overnight camps in Oregon. I totally understand, but it meant we couldn't have our program. So we're not having it this summer, but I'm sure we will in future summers. I think that explains most of it.